Welcome to Rune Soup, a weekly podcast about magic, culture, and the paranormal. My name is Gordon, and I shall be your host. This week, we will begin something of a sporadic miniseries on energy. A number of premium members have remarked that I'm typically pretty down on energy models, and I suppose I am, but with the qualification that I am pretty down on the prevailing energy models we've inherited from the 19th century with very little subsequent criticism. In many ways, this may be the final shoe to drop in this current magical revival. Restoration of context is well on its way. The decolonising turn is a bit behind that, but is also on its way. Regarding energy models, if you have at all dipped your toe into parapolitics, and listening to this podcast rather suggests that you have, you'll be aware we've essentially been working with only half of physics since Einstein fiat declared there was no ether or Bureaucracy or whatever it is you want to call it. And yet now we have torsion and electrogravitic toys tumbling out from behind the deep state curtain. So somebody wasn't listening and still doesn't want you to listen. If you had previously dipped your toe into parapolitics around the Bob Wilson era, you'd be familiar with Wilhelm Reich, whose conceptualizations of orgone and energy are probably, 100% wrong, but whose devices built on this model nevertheless managed to attract UFOs during his cloud-busting efforts, and who ran a thriving psychoenergetic practice until he was imprisoned and had his lab destroyed by the FBI. Or, I suppose, if you keep up with actual science, rather than press releases written in bro-speak, shared on large Facebook groups, or bow-tie-wearing military contractors playing a scientist on television, you'll be aware that models of evolution that rely exclusively on naturally selective materialism completely failed somewhere towards the end of the 20th century. And whether you want to call it morphic fields, or the even more terrifying possibility that 18th century notions of agency and or vitalism might have been a bit correct, descriptions of biological life are now incomplete without, gasp, some form of energy. So that's what we're going to talk about over the next few episodes, and specifically with this one, without very much more ado, let me introduce this week's guest, Phil Watt. Phil is a self-described neoshaman working exclusively with energy models. He's an activist, journalist, podcaster, and, living my actual dream, a market gardener in the amazing New South Welsh town of Bellingen. Phil, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure, Gordon.
All right, well, I'm looking forward to the traditional question one, Phil, because it turns out we have a town in common. But, Phil, were you a weird kid?
Well, it depends on how you define weird, and I know that's very subjective, but I would say I was not a part of normal thinking and behaviour.
Normal thinking and behaviour in the context of your high school, which I'm familiar with, in Swansea, or just generally?
Well, I've got Aries on Libra, and that means that I'm very much disconnected, or more probably better said, independent. So I was always struggling to fit in, always struggling to find a place in the world, always very determined and rebellious. So I really had no time or maybe even compassion back then for the bullshit that was going on around me. I didn't believe in it. It was a natural part of me to think things aren't right. This isn't how things are meant to be. And that's where I started to ask questions, even around the sort of the deeper nature of reality. So one of the first questions I ever asked myself that I remember asking in an esoteric sense was, all right, so the universe is here, or it's expanding or contracting or whatever it was at the time, but where the hell is the universe? What's it expanding into? So that spatial dimension question got me really thinking about the nature of reality. And through that process, obviously you go on a journey of enlightenment or empowerment, or just basic consciousness expansion. And it got me into the esoteric realm, the realm of spirituality, even New Age in a sense. And sometimes I don't like using the word spirituality in some contexts because just like the word God or magic, it has really been destroyed and tainted by all these ideological influences and personal biases and whatnot. But essentially what I was doing was exploring my connection to not just myself, but reality at large. And that's not what I saw happening around me. It wasn't happening through peers. It wasn't taught in school. It wasn't on the mainstream news. I rarely found a mechanism for understanding my connection with the world. And if I did, sometimes it would feel a little bit too fairy or unrealistic for me as well. So I just went on a personal journey, and because I'm very rational, like it's part of my makeup as well, I really want to understand it understand the rationale of why I was experiencing certain things, and so that's where I went to science and inevitably quantum physics and the quantum sciences and parapsychology and just psychology in general, the placebo effect, etc. And that was a pretty long journey of realizing at the start that, hang on, I'm having these synchronistic / symbolic experiences where there seems to be some patterns and some themes and some just outright meaning and purpose to what I was experiencing. But it could have been all in my own head. I remember thinking, look, I could just be crazy and this is just not how reality works, and I'm just creating this in my own mind. And through my journey, it was probably 5 years or so, I remember coming back to that same question and going, well, yeah, I am a bit crazy. I am creating this in my own mind. And that's the point. I am a co-manifester in this experience. I do have a lot of power, both conscious and unconscious, that I should be recognizing and celebrating. And so to sort of get back to your question, I was always weird in the sense that I wasn't following fads and mainstream trends and bowing to peer pressure. To a degree, of course, certain degrees I would be influenced highly by social settings and whatnot, and that was a fierce lesson in standing up into my own truth and whatnot. But and to this day, I still feel very much disconnected from the officialdom, so to speak, whether or not it's scientific, mainstream science or mainstream just general news, all that sort of stuff. I don't have a resonance with that stuff whatsoever, and that's been just an ongoing experience through my whole life.
Right. So for you, as a kid, it was more about pulling on some question threads rather than, say, for instance, growing up in a haunted house or being abducted by aliens or trying to have that kind of, or trying to experientially solve some strange things that happened to you as a kid.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. The experiences I had, such as out-of-body experiences and lucid dreaming and telepathically speaking to multidimensional beings and all those sorts of things, came much later into my late teens, early 20s. When I was a kid, I was just really not feeling okay with everything. I developed depression very, very early, and just didn't understand my place in the world and what the world actually meant. So without the right guidance in my life, I fell deep into depression for nearly a decade, really. It took me a long time of self-administered psychotherapy to really rewire myself neurologically and redesign myself conceptually to really rid myself of those dysfunctional thought and emotional sort of patterns. And free myself from that toxicity. And obviously, it still, to a certain extent, exists today, because it is very, very difficult to really rebirth revitalize the self right to the core, right to into the depths of the subconscious, and obviously beyond into the energetic blueprint and the construct and design of the DNA, what is expressed genetically and cellularly and all the rest of it. So, but yeah, no, it's one of those experiences, one of those journeys, should I say, that is ongoing. I feel like I'm always becoming more conscious. I'm always able to heal myself a little bit more. I'm always able to develop myself a little bit more. And I think that basic premise of being open to the adventure of healing and growth is a founding principle to becoming an authentic, empowered, and expanded human.
Yeah, I want to pick up on the adventure thing, but something you said in that response, I feel we should drill deeper on to start with, because for people who are listening, and I don't actually know how old you are, Phil, but I'm looking at this image of your Skype profile, and I would surmise we were approximately the same age. And you did mention the curious effects of peer pressure, because we grew up or went to school, particularly high school, in a place that had a very specific manifestation of monoculture at approximately the same time, where looking into these things rather than, having an interest in surfing and such is and was quite challenging, not just from access to materials, but also what that would say about you to the wider group growing up.
Absolutely. I mean, I was a surfer. I enjoyed it back in the day. I ended up, my fear of sharks ended up overcoming me, and the fact that I don't like being in the cold water. So I ended up funny enough, going to snowboarding instead. I was able to rug up and stay warm and
fewer sharks on the mountains.
Fewer sharks on the mountains, lots of ravens, which is one of the symbols I connected with very early in my experience. But
to be fair, just on the shark question, if you were surfing off Swansea, because I've dived there many a time, there are sharks there. So maybe that's a founded anxiety.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, back then, this is going back into my even late teens, early 20s, that I sort of stopped surfing so much. But it was just and it was also more of a lifestyle thing. I wasn't exactly on the beach all the time as well, and I was moving through many different social circles away from more surfing and into more rugby league and other types of energies that are associated with particular groups. And so I was exploring so much of myself through other people that it was easy for me to let go of one thing and start experiencing something else. So my life experience has been so robust. I've known so many different types of people. I've participated in so many types of sports and other activities and hobbies and whatnot. And what I always fall back on now, just thinking about it in retrospect, actually, is just that connection with myself. And what does it mean to connect with reality? And what does it mean to be human at the start of the 21st century in this moment? And let me tell you, it is both and as you know, a very magical and mad experience. It's like a precipice. It's like we're on the precipice of change in a sense. It's like a pinnacle of experience for duality, because of the way that the one side of the equation is becoming more empowered and more expanded and more conscious, where the other side, there's a lot of people falling further into the depths of deception and darkness. And so we're at a crossroads where it's like, well, what's going to happen? Are we going to have a breakaway civilization? Are we going to move further into this totalitarian, centralized dictatorship on a global level, as well as an energetic and obviously spiritual level as well? Or are we going to move into decentralization, sovereignty, abundance, authenticity, and natural law, and really the re-empowerment of the individual and our local communities, and bringing back decision making to that individual and local level.
All right. Well, when we're talking about the difference between centralization and decentralization, do you think in the medium term we're looking at a both and world? It seems unlikely, if you look back through history, that those ever-increasing centralizing powers won't consciously decentralize away from themselves.
Yeah, I'd say that is happening right now. There are many people getting involved in local community groups and regional groups, or even national groups, aimed at re-empowering the decision-making of individuals and communities. But it's also the opposite effect is happening, obviously. For example, in Australia, the no jab, no pay rules of vaccinations and just the general legalisation or legislation of greater powers for the state. And so, sorry, yeah.
No, you go.
Well, so just to complete that, it's obvious that it's both happening, and that is the direction we're most likely going to go, at least into the short term, and most likely the medium term, unless something of a major event, so to speak, occurs. So, and who knows? There's been plenty of spanners of the works thrown into the archives of history, as you mentioned. So, who knows what awaits us as things unfold?
Yeah, I think we struggle today with not falling back on 19th century ways of attempting to solve or looking for solves for the challenges we face. So if rather than looking at a left-right tension, which is sort of arranged around an industrial workforce that doesn't really exist anymore, what we have is a kind of up-down centralization, decentralization tension. And it's interesting to see that in the medium term, I think both things are happening, because the more decentralization happens, the more centralizing powers want to do things like regulate and surveil and so on. And it seems like that is that's the pulling apart tension, and it's quite challenging. And people end up being quite strange bedfellows, because most of the people, myself included, listening to this show would lean further to the left than to the right. But when you're on a decentralization axis, you have, libertarians and agorist anarchists and so on kind of aligned at a local level with priorities, versus what we're now seeing, particularly, when we're recording this, it's a few days after the most recent attack in London, and the inevitable and utterly pointless response from the British government is increasing social media surveillance and worldwide agreements with governments to further kind of surveil the population. And so there's a centralizing surveilling power, which is the only thing they know how to do regardless of the challenges, and it's also precisely the direction we shouldn't be looking for actual viable solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that you've hit the nail on the head with the real tension, but the real tug of war comes down to decentralization versus centralization, or individual empowerment versus state empowerment. But the left-right divide is certainly very real. It's a divide and conquer strategy being played out to a really effective impact at the moment, and that is for the masses. The masses are sucked into that ridiculous notion of having to pick a side. Where personally, I'm just like, well, I can see some of the central tenets of the right and left have both some important aspects to them. And as a centralist, I guess, one who likes to balance out the different energies and the different perspectives and the different ideas, that there can be an amalgamation process on these different viewpoints, different stands, so to speak. It's a bit of a crazy scenario that we're in right now. It's as I mentioned before, it's like that pinnacle of duality in a sense, and just to reinforce what you said again, that the more that we decentralize and empower ourselves, the natural balance of that is to, in this construct, is for some to continue their agenda of further centralisation and power consolidation.
So I want to talk about that metaphorically, because I think, and I appreciate it, it's almost like people who are aligned with what we're talking about need to learn a new conceptual language in many cases to think about it, because the response, when you look at things like increasing inequality, a centralized response further increases inequality. And the metaphor I think of that I quite like is that there was at least one Gnostic school who believed that every person that kind of woke up or achieved gnosis, the more people who did, the more likely it was that the sort of archonic control system in the universe would be destroyed. So it's a question of freeing enough people as possible from the ideology. It's a surprisingly dangerous, almost like full-blown cosmic terrorist thing to do. That it would, the tension of having people wake up would break an entire system. And for me, when you look at how if you look back over the last few decades of Western governments going left, right, left, right, left, right, and having the same neoliberal geopolitical centralizing policies regardless, it seems like the only thing left to do is to learn that new language of waking up and almost have them overextend their centralizing mania for control so that and that's the way to defeat it rather than trying to come at it head on. And I just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, well, it can only get to a certain point, a certain breaking point, until even the most highly indoctrinated go, well, hang on, that's not right. We can't allow this. There is a gnosis in that concept of at least some level of freedom. There's so many people who understand the corruption of politics, for example. I would say that over half of the world's population at least have some level of degree of understanding when it comes to that. And there's a lot of people who have dug a little bit deeper and understand, the corporatocracy to a sense, where there's a fundamental alliance between big money and governmental apparatus. And then there's obviously, you can go much further down the rabbit hole of which the rabbit holes of both truth and untruth, and I'll elaborate on that in a second, where they understand scientific materialism as a psyop and the whole process of suppressing the authentic self is an amazing strategy to ensure that people don't unite to bring about the change that we really need, because they're too busy focusing on their own issues and in states of fear and anxiety and sadness and all the rest of it. But when it comes to waking up or having gnosis, I find that language is a little bit troubling for me, because the further I've become conscious, I've thought, oh yeah, that's great, I get something really unique there. But then later it's challenged, and I become even more conscious again. And so having gnosis, just knowing, can be troublesome as well, because we do rely on intuition, and a lot of the time, and a lot of it is just guesswork. I mean, there is as many intuitive interpretations as to contradict each other as what exists. So there's always one person who thinks they know something and another person thinks the opposite, and they think they know something. And that, I believe, brings further division and also potential deception and distraction on so many levels as well. And those beliefs of knowing something can harden into dogmas and really limit our potential as an individual expression of this interconnected energy consciousness grid that characterises our current construct. So there is I think I've lost a little bit of the trail of the original question.
Well, it's all good, because I wanted to jump in there and say, wouldn't that description you just had of the interconnected thing be an example of an ossified assumption? Is this not just the eternal quest of, and I guess that would come back to gnosis being a more embodied thing rather than holding an opinion. All maps are necessarily limited?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. That through my experience, I've had explicit manifestations of synchronization and connection with my world. But that doesn't mean that I can't expand my understanding of what connection means, what connection, what those experiences actually represent. So yeah, no doubt, no, absolutely no doubt that you've got to stay open to all of our philosophies on reality, no matter how convicted we might be about something. But all we can do is use the information, the understanding that we've got in our moment, and transmute that energy in a way that's going to encourage the further development and healing of the self and the world at large.
So I want to pick back because this leads quite neatly into talking about what we may consider a best practice way of doing this. In Chaos Protocols, I call like one of these. You have to have. I call it becoming invincible, but you need an event of sufficient extremity when it comes to magic or the paranormal or so on that it is impossible to permanently backslide into a materialist, naturalist assumption.
But, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, you don't get the toothpaste back into the tube after something like that's happened, right? So you mentioned adventure, and so I want to kind of wind it back to the beginnings of your, I guess, more serious explorations in your late teens. So double question. What were some of the ideas or books or teachers that you initially encountered, whether or not they kind of stayed with you as ideas that kind of sent you on this path? And when you say adventure, we will eventually talk about sacred travel and so on, but what do you see the role of adventure in this general process of becoming invincible, kind of upping people's level of conscious awareness, however we want to describe it? How does adventure feed into that? So there's the double barrel question.
When I was younger, a young adult, I was really asking big questions to myself. One of the biggest was, what's the purpose of life? Why am I here? What's the meaning of it all? And it was quite a simple, efficient answer for me. And it was just growth. The purpose of my life is to grow. Because everywhere I looked around me, things seemed to be changing. And I figured, well, if everything's changing, then it's important that I ascribe some growth to my change instead of going backwards or being self-abusive or harmful for myself. So that's one of the big drivers to or big definitions of the adventure of life, is to keep growing, to keep expanding. That's for me personally. But one of the most important books that I read, which came into my life ironically, synchronistically, was the Celestian Prophecy. And that put me on a journey of becoming more conscious of how I am connected to the world. And that led into, I guess, some sort of new age perspectives. Let me say straight up, my knowledge and study of into some of the ancient wisdoms and traditions and modalities for magic and whatnot is not advanced whatsoever. And I've done that explicitly. I've done that on purpose, especially recently as I've stepped into my, I guess, neo-shamanism role, because I really wanted to, as you'd be familiar as a chaos magician, that I really utilize my moment and what's going on around me as important influences or at least tools for how I contribute to the influence, the emission and attraction of energy that I both unconsciously and consciously do. So when I went into I guess I was not trapped. I was always quite critical about any sort of belief system, any perspective. I always felt like I was able to absorb good ideas and reject bad ones. That's my personal subjective interpretation of my experience. But I went through sort of the idea of almost mainstream spirituality, and thought, well, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. That does. This does. That doesn't. And I got a little bit put off that whole track, so to speak, because it didn't feel right to me on so many levels, and there tended to be a fadness to it, or again just some dogmas. If you don't follow suit in particular ideas, whether or not it's spirituality or systemic change, then you sort of get isolated again. And that's another thing, I've gotten isolated as well, because I'm not necessarily in agreement with some of the ideas in for how we should move forward in conservative or libertarian circles. On every level, I've really experienced the rebellious nature of myself. I've never really fit nicely into any ideology or belief system, no matter how fringe or alternative it might be. So that independence has really been a deep characterization of my adventure as well. It really has been about growth and healing and growth, but growth does encompass healing, as well as maintaining that independence in a way that I'm not going to be influenced or inhibited by ideas that might seem good on the surface, but really didn't resonate somewhere deeper inside of me.
I just want to, before we jump into the adventure and sacred travel part, Phil, on the show, inevitably, there's kind of like a long-running almost theme or bit about the first books that people read, and they're usually shameful in retrospect. And it's weird you mentioned Celestine Prophecy, because I can remember being in high school and having that be passed around and so on. But that one's right up there. That one's right up there as text that people may be willing to admit that they rather sheepishly read. We have a lot of that in Magic Land. The first book you have some sympathy for, because it does kind of start the literary journey. But you look back on it and go, well, we'll chalk that up to a phase, shall we?
Well, I mean, it's important. It was massively important, massively influential, regardless if it set me, if it didn't. If there was a lot of it I had to challenge later, because it still was an initiator.
Yeah. Let's just not beat around the bush. Most of that story is made up. But for people who aren't listening, I don't know when you read it, but for me that was mid-90s, early 90s, mid-90s in Newcastle. Not exactly a hotbed. We didn't have a British library in Newcastle. And at the time, that was for me, like, I remember reading that going, wow, this is amazing. And then I lent it to a friend and she's like, most of this is bullshit. And I'm like, I'm kind of crushed. But I remember distinctly my Celestine Prophecy moment in high school.
Yeah, it was vital for my own progression.
Yeah,
and so, like, I mean, we can talk about the what I would sort of call the many truths theory. That there's all these multiple truths that exist on almost different levels or in different dimensions, and that some are contradictory if they're placed in the same context, but they work really well if they're considered on different platforms, so to speak. The idea that there is only one singular and all-encompassing truth to really describe the nature of reality doesn't sit well with me whatsoever. There's so many ways of describing the potentiality of reality, and that not only the potentiality but the actual manifestation of it as well. And
Is
so
that, I just want to interrupt. Is that really the tension? I mean, I think that's more like a left-right tension rather than a central-decentral. Let me give you an alternative version of that. In Magic Land, the tension is between armchair magicians and people who actually do stuff, who actually do the practices. So going back to the Celestine Prophecy, I've not read it since high school. However, I'm quietly confident that if I did some of the visualization practices that I do in fact remember, the parts where they pretended to have elevated to another dimension so the people with the guns couldn't get them and so on. But there are actual meditational techniques and visualizations in it. If I actually did them, I would have an embodied experience. So I don't know, I wonder, is it about description so much, or is it about, frankly, and not that all texts are equal, but the tension is in do them rather than read them and think you have the answer?
Oh, look, absolutely. That's one of the issues I have with the New Age movement is it's been hijacked into this passive sort of situation where people are applying themselves on multiple levels, not just from a magic level or an energetic influence level, but also as well as what they're doing in their local communities and what they're doing in their own lives. Are they creating further independence, a bit more self-reliance, not sort of healing the codependence that we've got with the system, as well as getting active in their communities as well, whatever that may mean, whatever their passions are, whatever their opportunities are, etc. So, the actual application of knowledge, i.e. wisdom, is highly lacking within the Truth and Freedom Network. It certainly irritates me to see that people harden their beliefs into dogmas, but then not only are they contributing to that further division, but they're also not actually standing up and realizing their authenticity and realizing their truth through action.
All right, so now we will definitely talk about the adventure stuff. Like me, you left the place you were born, and for people who are listening, Phil and I actually connected via the Rune Soup Facebook page. So I creeped on Phil's profile page, as you do, and I've seen some pictures of him around the world and so on. So at some point, you decided, Swansea and the Central Coast weren't big enough. There was a bigger world out there, and you've seen some fairly impressive parts of it. So I want to talk, seeing as we're talking about actually living and embodying new ways of, or improved, if you will, or more nuanced ways of thinking. Talk through that. Talk through, the actual journey and how you got to where you are now.
Well, as I said, I started to develop my spirituality or philosophical understanding of life. And the original adventures I went on were more internal. As I mentioned before, I started having lots of lucid dreams and out-of-body experiences and participating in psychotropic sort of rituals, not that I understood them as that at that point, and really started to going through the inner adventure and exploring different sort of creations within myself. And that was a really empowering experience. One of the first lucid dreams I ever had was I went to a rogue planet, and I was standing on this planet, and it was just completely engulfed in fire and evil and the shadow side, so to speak. And I knew it was some type of parasitic energy on myself, and just as a representation of reality. And so I sort of zoomed away from the planet, like, I was looking at the planet, and I was standing on the moon or something. And I just remember consciously going, right, this needs to be healed. And the only way I could heal it was blowing it up. So I completely eradicated this planet. And that was one of the first real conscious experiences I had.
Were you doing actual, were you spontaneously lucid dreaming, or were you doing some of the, wake up in the middle of the night, clock setting kind of thing, which I've had some very good experiences with, but just wondering, were you deliberately doing it or spontaneously doing it?
I think both from memory, but at that point, that was spontaneous. These sorts of things, these visions were coming out of nowhere. I didn't really have a great understanding. It was my early 20s. I really had no idea what this was about. One of the biggest other ones I had was just walking into a doctor's office or reception area, and a little old cute lady, absolutely purely beautiful in her own way, said to me, you don't have to do this, And I said, no, I have to. This is my choice. And she said, well, you can just kick back and relax if you want. I'm like, yeah, nah. So I need to do this. It's the right thing to do. Plus, it's probably going to be a bit exciting. I mean, that's all paraphrased. I can't remember the exact words that were used, but it was that general gist. And so that was the sanctioning of my ongoing experience or role as an activist, as a change agent, so to speak. And so she took me through hundreds of doors, hundreds of different realities. And that was just one of the most mind-blowing, empowering dreams lucid dreams that I'd ever actually had. So, but that was very spontaneous. So through those experiences, I started to connect with my own role as facilitating a shift in consciousness or energy or whatever you would like to call it. And that's when this was not long before I actually did a student exchange over in England. And through that student exchange, I was able to travel for probably 8 months, something like that. And I traveled all through Europe and UK and other areas. And it was based on, I think it was a dream that I had, or it was just a meditation that I had, because I was meditating. That was when I was really getting into meditation back then as well, where I had this sort of vision of me looking at myself from the third perspective, or like from a bird's eye view, and sort of channeling energy within myself till it got to the singularity, so to speak. And then I exploded it and made that singularity one of purity, and then exploded it, which encompassed the planet, or where I was actually located. So if I was in Budapest, I could see myself standing in a particular area of Budapest, and then it would encompass that country, and then the planet, and then the galaxy, and the solar system, galaxy, universe, and beyond. And then I would have to consciously try and suck myself back into that particular energetic field, so to speak. And then I'll sort of come back to consciousness through in where I was, whether or not it was a dream or if I was doing a meditation in Budapest. And so through that process, I realized that I wasn't that conscious at all. And I still believe that I'm really not that conscious at all in the scheme of things, in the scheme of how we can experience our snapshot, our finite snapshot of infinity. There is so much adventure using that theme to be had. And so I because that was in relation to something else that I really noticed was really apparent to me as well, and that is that I was manifesting stuff, these connections, these experiences, in a way that showed that had deep, profound meaning, but I wasn't doing it. It wasn't the Phil, the egoic Phil, the conscious Phil that was creating that. There was something deeper to me that was doing it, and that's when you look at the subconscious mind and how powerful that is, the unconscious aspect of our sort of snapshot, our biological snapshot, as well as something even deeper beyond that, which some people call the soul. I use the phrase energetic blueprint a lot because it makes it a little less emotional for some people who might not want to believe in certain other layers or dimensions of reality. But most certainly, it was very clear to me that there was an energy that was the primary mechanism for this manifestation. That was influencing my experiences and helping to create particular experiences, almost like a destiny in a sense. And I can talk about how that relates to free will later if you'd like. But there was a destiny aspect to my experience that was a really strong driving force. So because I knew that I wasn't that conscious and that I felt like there was something more powerful, way, way, way more powerful than my little old ego, my filter on this situation, that I had to get myself out of the way of it. I would prefer the energy that is the core of my being, or at least the core of my individual being, in the context of the unified being. But that energy needed to do its work. It needed me to get out of my way. So when I would do my spells, when I went through Europe and elsewhere and everywhere since, I don't put any intention into it except for the intention of, I should say that I do at times have very, very, very specific intentions to the energy work that I do. But a lot of the time as well, especially back then, I was completely removing my own, or trying to remove my own bias and what I believed was the right thing, and just allowing that core energy to come through and set the intention. So the intention was the blueprint to do the work that it needs to do, so to speak. So yeah, that's where I became a bit more empowered with that, even though I was sort of giving my power away a little bit to my conscious power, so to speak, and putting it into what the more fundamental aspects of my being, and then just wanted to sort of get more cultured, to experience more experiences, I was absorbing all these symbols and energies throughout my experience, and not just connecting to one primary one. So I mentioned the raven before. The bats were my first big so-called totem that exposed itself in my reality. I've been through many different colours and animals and numbers and just general themes and patterns, and not really held on to them really strongly. Like, this is it. This is the one that I need to really connect with the rest of my life. I've just put it in my apparatus of energy, so to speak, and just kept on remaining open to what else I could absorb, what else I could help channel into my own particular framework and express that more to the world at large.
So, Phil, in all of these, and it might be winding the clock back a little bit, coming back to the notion of becoming invincible, you've mentioned lucid dreaming experiences and OBEs and this sort of very horizontal and satisfying and very robust way of connecting with places. And you also, at the opening of the show, kind of mentioned contact with extra-dimensional beings. So what was the thing for you at the beginning of the journey that squeezed the toothpaste out of the tube such that it won't ever get back in? People inevitably have lots of background events, telephone telepathy, weird precognitive dreams and so on, which is fairly commonly observed across the population. But every so often you get the event that makes you realize we are playing a much bigger game. And what was it for you?
I'm not sure if I do have one, Gordon.
Really?
I think back to it, and it really is just an accumulation of experiences. When I smoked DMT and went through a multiple perspective self and had a very very real, very vivid experience, telepathically speaking, and shaking the hand of a multidimensional being and a half multidimensional being, half human-like character. I was already, that was no surprise to me whatsoever. that was just like, yeah, this is. I mean, it was mind blowing in the sense, or heart blowing in the sense that it was such a vivid experience, but it didn't change obviously there is an evolution of understanding and whatnot, but it didn't have a dramatic shift in how I sort of was experiencing the world. That was to be expected on some level. I've been to Peru and had shamanic ceremonies with ayahuasca, and the first one I had there, it was like totally amazing on so many different levels. And I spoke to Mother Ayahuasca and connected with the cat energy again, and done lots of beautiful things with other so-called self-aware intelligences. But again, that wasn't mind-blowing for me. That was again to be expected. That whole experience for me was it was just like it was a tribute to my consciousness of consciousness, so to speak. It hadn't shifted me so deeply philosophically that I had to read sort of design the way that I perceive the world at a fundamental level. So now I look back, and it really was a natural thing from at least that early teenage years, maybe not younger. I was very much almost probably a ADHD child, I know that there's the potentiality of that not even really existing in and of itself, but I was certainly behaviourally abnormal in the sense that I wouldn't fit in and just do what I wanted to do, and was a bit crazy. And but when I started to get a bit of consciousness about myself, that's where I started to ask some of these questions and then have certain experiences, and it just really developed over time to the point where the shift wasn't so much rigid. It was fluent.
So, having crept on your Facebook page, and then your websites and so on as well, there is, and we'll get to sort of where you are now, but there's a kind of there's a career of service and policy and community and so on interaction. And are these, and also, and this is the other part, I believe on your Facebook page it says organic farmer. And so are these examples, are these two things inextricable? And are they examples of what we were kind of talking about before when it comes to the difference between armchair and embodied practice, that for this to be satisfying and lasting and to have an impact, it needs to be that sort of embodied and engaged thing. Is this kind of the career journey you've been on, you think? Were you a shaman before you were a shaman, put it that way?
Yes, I was certainly an unconscious shaman, so to speak. And I wouldn't know if I would call myself a shaman. I know I practice neo-shamanism. I know I practice certain energy transmutation. Shaman, well, that is a term to describe a person who helped to connect with the immaterial to help heal and develop his tribe. Now, obviously, our tribes are completely fragmented and disconnected, and we've lost a lot of that sort of primitive, and I say that in a romanticized way, or sorry, not a romanticized, in a positive way. That primitive energy and connection and with relationships has been so destroyed over the evolution of our so-called civilized society that we've really come full circle and now created what I believe is more of a global tribe, that we've now got the tribe of humanity. We're interconnected instantaneously by the web. We're sharing these energies on that collective level, and we're now part of this sort of larger tribe where there's sort of multiple shaman roles that exist. That it's like if you visualize that image where it's a map of the earth and there's all these dots on it, and they're connected by sort of loops that look like meridian lines or something, and there's all these pinpoints of consciousness, i.e. the neo-shamans that are doing their energetic work both individually and but collectively at the same time, and it's helping to heal and grow and raise the vibration, all that sort of stuff. So I certainly feel connected on that level as somebody who works with energy. But I guess the description of shaman is a very personal and subjective thing as well. Sorry, I lost your original question though.
We were going to talk about does this map to your career so far, but I'm glad you mentioned that because I used that. The shaman word was almost a trick question because one of the things there are some criticisms around using the word in a modern context, which I think are valid, and I choose those words correctly, in the sense that you can make the case. It's not my case, but I see the validity in it, that it's not actually quantitatively different from kind of Western monoculture. It's sort of the last thing left for it to absorb and commodify, because the term itself is very specifically located to a part of Eurasia, and it sort of got universalized in a kind of racially problematic way in the 20th century with the work of Mircea Eliade and then, Michael Harner, and neither of whom were actually racists in the sense of treating people differently based on race. But now we have this term that has historically, recent historically, 70s and so on, been used in an appropriative function. And that's why the word was kind of a trick question, because we have these two problems, which is that, and I think those criticisms are valid, but by the same token, what we need to be able to do is learn how to interact with and learn from non-Western cultures, particularly in the situation we're in, where it's clear that many of our fundamental premises aren't a very good match for the 21st century, and there appear to be some out there. So the thing that I find interesting about neo-shamanism is how we navigate a tension between there should be a way of interacting with cultures that isn't appropriative. And I just wonder what your thoughts are around that, because I think you kind of spoke to it when you said, I'm not that comfortable with the word. And it does carry a lot of baggage, but it also offers a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I just use the term neo-shamanism. That's the best word I've come across in this moment. That may evolve as time goes on, because there's still the fundamental, sort of the core role of the shaman that exists in this day and age, but it's been transformed. It's beyond what the original role was. So I do see a place for healing of the tribe and interacting with a particular energy on an individual basis, as well as a group sort of basis. I personally don't work with spirits. I have connected with what I would say are self-aware intelligences or other entities or whatnot in my past, but for me, I feel uncomfortable working on that level because I don't feel conscious enough to understand if I'm being tricked or not, essentially. So whether or not people like working with angels or God itself or spirits or aliens or what their natural role is, and that's perfectly fine. I don't think that we all should do it the same. We all have our own methodology of working with energy, but personally, I don't sit in comfort, like I said, because I could be just working with the archons or some sort of deceptive energy of some type. So I personally just work with information and concepts in a way that I'm embodying or sort of filtering that information, that energy, in a way that connects with my own experience, with my own being in this moment, and helping to heal whatever I need to do and to grow whatever I need to grow in a way that reflects the microcosm, reflects the macrocosm, and vice versa, reflects what the greater healing, the greater growth that needs to occur, both on a planetary, third dimensional and multidimensional level and beyond, moving into the spiritual warfare zone in a sense. So that's the approach I take. To go back to your original question, I'm not sure if I answered that your latter question, but to go back to your original question about translating that knowledge, that experience into action. Absolutely, that's why I went into government. I worked for bureaucracies for nearly 10 years. Policy development, project management at the federal level, as well as social work on the state level. And I did that because I wanted to help. I felt like, I was still going through a lot of healing and sort of uncovering my own traumas and whatnot at the early days, especially. But I really did want to give back. I thought, and I was a bit naive back then as well. I certainly didn't understand the depths of the deception and the basic theft of of our system. But I thought I was going to make a difference, or I wanted to make a difference, and I did. I certainly did to a certain degree, especially when I got on the individual level where I was working with kids, families, parents, doing relationship mediation, mentoring, general life guidance, lifestyle guidance, really just information sharing and helping facilitate sustained change in people's lives. That was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, regardless of how difficult and challenging it was. But yeah, so I have moved into certain areas to give back, because not only did I feel like, well, I would love to have got that support, although I don't think the support was out there. I needed to really do this myself. This is a very personal journey, so I can empower myself to be able to actually help others instead of following other people's guidance. And I've been very independent like that with, as I said, with books and previous ideologies and belief systems and other stuff. I really haven't absorbed or really taken on board any real prominent energy like that. But I really wanted to give back. And so through that process, I realized that, hang on, my ethics are being tested in a sense that I really can't embody my truth and my ethics in a way that wasn't going to cause me harm, in a sense. So what I'm
just to interrupt, there's nothing quite like seeing how the sausage is made. Is there working in a bureaucracy, or for me it was mainstream media, but you come out of it, and I know we're going to talk about your podcast series in a moment, but I know you spoke to a friend of mine, Greg Carlwood, and inevitably in a dinner party situation, if the conversations slide a little bit conspiratorial, you just want to say you have no idea. You have no idea how bad it actually is. It does strain credulity unless you've seen the sausage made.
Well, I'm so glad that I went through some philosophical development before I went into what was going on in the external realm and beyond in terms of the shadow side, because I was very prepared and very equipped to process that experience productively. But a lot of people don't. A lot of people get stuck in not just the dysfunction and the theft of the system itself, but also when it comes into some of the satanic and pedophilic and other sort of energy and dark occult stuff that exists in our world, and they're really unprepared for it. They're not in an empowered position, empowered enough to be able to, as I said, process that information in a productive, healing way, because it's so important as on an individual level to shift I keep saying the word transmute that energy into one that is going to be a facilitator or a contributor to growth and healing and whatnot. So yeah, I'm very happy I did that, but I experienced a lot of suffering because I stood up for what was right. There was absolutely no fucking way I was going to be doing anything that I believed was toxic and unhealthy, i.e. following orders from managers that I knew were wrong. So I did not do anything that I felt was against my moral compass. I refused to do things. I went above managers. I upwardly managed regularly, which means that I would design the situation in a way where I knew I'd get the result I wanted. Very, very simple. A lot of people aren't conscious enough or have enough experience to do that. They're maybe not even confident enough to do that. But I knew I had to do the right thing, so I would do it to the best of my ability, and I would share information, and I would coach new staff, and really help bring more light and truth to that particular institution or agency. But then I just went, well, look, enough's enough. I mean, I did a lot of this podcast stuff whilst I was still working these bureaucracies. It was fucking legendary. I was just like, no, I am not going to be swayed from telling the truth, even though I'm part of this system right now. I would literally just go, right, you are going to be talking about or expressing, sort of writing about information that is contrary to particular mainstream ideas or beliefs. But Phil, it's the truth, and it's at least more closely aligned to the truth than other viewpoints. So I felt comfortable to do that because I knew I was doing the right thing. But I got to the end of that and just went, look, it needs a shift. I need to move, unhinge myself in a sense. I really wanted to provide a more authentic service to my community. So that's when I went into farming and just went, well, we've just leased a property and we've converted an acre and a half into an organic market garden where we've connected with our community and provided not just nutrition dense sort of food and toxin-free food, but also energetically abundant food too. We try and plant biodynamically and follow biodynamic principles to the best of our knowledge and ability. We practice permaculture to the best we can as well. It's not our property, so obviously we haven't created a complete permaculture system, but we do incorporate the ideas and the energy of it to the best of our ability. But yeah, and then also the love and the good vibrations that we put into the food itself is some of the most the best servicing provisions I've provided to my community, because I know that there's so much goodness happening on that level, that biological level too, when they eat it.
Yes, I saw in your Redesigning Society Series 1, you have Jeff Lawton. I was just up at Zaytuna Farm this weekend, funnily enough. I was actually in Bellingen on Friday, so we had small little world there.
Yeah, you should have come and say hello.
Well, next time. Funnily enough, I have other Novocastrians who have just recently moved there, and one of them's called Phil. Well, he's from Cessnock, so, he's scum, but we love him. I want to talk a little bit about that migration into organic market gardening. I mean, did you just start growing stuff, or did you have, suppliers in mind or customers in mind, or were you going to say, well, I'm just going to grow stuff and go to the market and see what happens?
Yeah, I winged it, mate. I had no fucking clue what I was doing. So I had some knowledge of gardening. I hadn't done much of it in the past. I'd obviously been learning about permaculture. I've got my permaculture design course certificate as well, so I'd done that and learnt through that process. But my life has been winging it. My life has just been having a good crack at life and seeing how it unfolds and adapting and responding and utilising it to the best of my ability and to the best of for the best of those around me as well. So no, I really had no big idea what we were going to do except for that paddock there. We're going to convert, and we did so. And it was a lot of physical exertion, really good fun, really challenging though, and just sort of let it unfold naturally like my life had really done. I really don't try and have specific goals. Specific goals have always been have rarely been realised. I've learnt a long, long time ago to expect the unexpected. So what I do and have for a long time is to head in a general direction. I'd like to go in those sort of areas That's my intention. My intention, as I said, I don't feel like I'm conscious enough to know what I need to manifest from my energetic blueprint and my subconscious and my conscious. Although as I go on and get a little wiser and get a little bit more conscious, I'm able to align those three aspects of myself a little bit more. I still make sure I get myself out of the way if I need to and just let it manifest the way it needs to.
I was just going to say that's you get smart enough to know how dumb you actually are and when you should get out of the way and never you never get to 100%. I always kick myself because when something really fucks up and I'm like, I fucking knew that was going to happen. And I got in my own fucking way because I thought I knew better and I don't.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's one of the first real core lessons that I learned, like you're not going to create exactly what you want, Phil. Try and be open to for things to occur more naturally, or more. When I say naturally, I mean as what the energy is trying to manifest. Instead of putting parameters around it, it has to be this way. Because when I did that, you just get sad, wouldn't you? Or you get angry, or you get frustrated, or feel fear, or feel disempowered that you weren't able to exactly manifest what you exactly wanted. So I just head in a general direction, and even if I do set a specific goal, I'm currently writing another book. I was writing one last year, and I don't feel like it was the right energy of the time in retrospect. So I've just put that on the shelf for the time being. I'm now actually writing a novel, which is quite funny because I don't read novels at all. But the missus has been giving it a real good tick of approval, and that's great because she's a pretty strong critic about my shit. So, and I really would like to release that book. I really would like to offer that to the world. Now, if it goes, if it doesn't happen, well, shit happens. If it goes okay, well, that's good. If it goes great. If it goes not so great, well, that's great too. I've really learnt to be okay with the experience and just process it in a way that's not going to be self-abusive. It's going to be more empowering for myself. So I did this farm thing, learned along the way.
Did you fuck up your first season like most market gardeners do?
Well, we had massive challenges with the weather. We had basically a drought in Bellingen for the spring, which is actually been repetitive over the last couple of years for that particular time of year. But it was very hot and very, very dry, more so than usual. So there was a lot of people struggling. We have access to the river, and so we're pumping water to do so. But even still, it's almost like you couldn't get enough water on it. It was just too hot, too dry. But then some massive rains came and just pretty much exploded some of our plants as well from the stems and whatnot. But in amongst all that, we were quite successful to a degree. The transition from spring to autumn, just from summer to autumn, should I say, wasn't as efficient as what I would like to be. But overall, we've grown some really good, healthy, nutritious food. I've freed up my time to focus on some of my other creative projects, and really enjoyed getting my hands in the soil and connecting back to earth on that level, to nature on that level, because as much as I love camping and being out in nature and really getting immersed in energy, especially isolated in a sense, away from the dense energy of human activity, there is something else about getting that all that dirt underneath their fingernails and sweating it out and getting ticks and basically being out in the sun and touching plants.
Well, that was going to be one of the last questions, which was, was there a morning where you kind of look out over the market garden and go, I quite recently was a bureaucrat in a fairly toxic system where I did my best, and now I'm doing this, and I feel pretty good.
Oh, like every fucking day. Like I mean, it's a great transition. Who knows where it'll go from here? But it's certain what it is stepping into my authenticity in a more pure sense. So that it is increasing independence. It is honouring my sovereignty. It is honouring the evolution that I needed to go through in terms of how I contribute and interact with the world. So they're the important things. How that manifests, well, organic gardening, writing, whatever. We've got a plethora of ways we can express our art and our creativity. And I encourage everybody to do so. And it's not as simple as going, all right, I'm going to choose to do this and I'm going to do it, because sometimes it can take quite some time. Like it took me months upon months to really get to Bellingen and to be able to put myself in a position to make those decisions and to take those actions. But it is possible. It just takes a little bit of persistence, a bit of courage, a bit of strength, the commitment. Honor yourself, connect with yourself, understand where you are within where you are in terms of what needs to sort of, as I always go back to it, what needs to heal and what needs to grow, and try and respect that to the best of our ability. So as much as it might be a little bit difficult, a little bit daunting for people to understand how they need to move forward for their own authenticity and sovereignty, it was for me too, but it can be done, and it can continue to be done as long as we respect it enough.
Nice one, Phil. Well, this has been a great chat. I love the journey. It seems to be one of there's sort of a broader theme of further embodiment of practice and philosophy, culminating at least at the moment with market gardening, of which I'm very jealous as a fellow PDCer. So for people who would like to know more about yourself and your podcast and your upcoming series 2, lay it on them. Where do they find out more about Phil?
Okay, so my Facebook is Phillip J. Watt, PhillipJWATT. My website's pushingthetippingpoint.com. That just captures most of my written work, as well as my podcast. My personal development website or lifestyle coaching website, I do work one-on-one with people as well around building strategies for healing and growth again, and stepping into authenticity and even just designing designing how they're going to move forward and head in the right direction in life. That is vitalityguidance.com. My YouTube channel is the Conscious Society. That's where I originally housed all these interviews with my podcast. I did an article series called Redesigning Society, where I identify what I believe are some of the core issues in our world, i.e. what sort of philosophical and systemic shifts we need to go to bring justice, truth, honour, and sovereignty to our world, and abundance as well. And through that process, I wrote articles and reached out to what I believe are some of the real leaders in our world, such as Jeff Lawton, Helena Norberg-Hodge, Rupert Sheldrake, Dean Radin, Michael Tellinger. The list goes on. As there is an interview there of Greg Carlwood as well. Fascinating discussion. But there are so many good interviews there that are designed to provide potential solutions to this mess. Because as you talked about the embodiment of that change, that action, there are so many people that are just focusing on the issues. Let's just whinge about what's going on in money or politics or geopolitics or economics or banking or pharmaceuticals, vaccines, fluoride, food. The list goes on. There's all these problems out there, and they need to be identified. They need to be exposed. Absolutely, no doubt. But where the imbalance lies in this process is there is not enough focus on the solutions. And that's why I say that they're potential solutions, because I don't want to say I've got the answers. I don't want to say that that my guests have all the answers. I know I don't have all the answers. I know that nobody has all the answers. And so if we just open ourselves of the possibilities of how we could move forward, both in terms of a greater social system design as well as the practical sort of specifics such as permaculture, etc., then we might be able to build a greater unity within the Truth and Freedom Network that is really putting on the stage, the public stage, the debates that we really need to be having. And that's been a lot of my recent focus, is trying to bring a bit more unification within the independent media and within the truth-seeking community, because at the moment we have suffering from a divide and conquer strategy. Once again, we've been split into various camps. We've fallen for it. We're fighting against each other. We've got very little unity, very little cooperation. There are little pockets cooperating with each other, and another pocket over there, another pocket over there. But ultimately, there is no sort of general theme, general thread that connects us, which I think is detrimental to what our goals are, which is moving more back into natural law, more into sovereignty, decentralisation, and honouring some of the true values of being human. So, yeah, they're the ways that people can follow my work. My podcast is at SoundCloud, but it's available on iTunes and whatnot. I will say now that an apology in advance. It was my first time interviewing people and really capturing that information. So,
Phil, if they listen to this show, they're very tolerant.
Yeah, it's I'm definitely rusty in certain ways, but I feel like I've learned a lot, and I'm going to do season 2, develop that over the next few months, and it's a pleasure to know that you'll be on it too, Gordon, and we can further elaborate on how to embody magic in our modern world.
Nice one. Well, as ever, all these links will be up in the show notes, and as people listening know, I'm a massive Jeff Lawton fan, and you also have one of my other heroes, Dr. Elaine Ingham, in the list, so I'll make sure that they're highlighted, as long as everywhere else you can find the good Mr. Watt. So thanks very much once again, Phil. Amazing chat.
Thank you, Gordon. My absolute pleasure.
Surfer turned bureaucrat turned shaman turned podcaster turned market gardener. Not much of a surprise we got a unique perspective from Phil here. I'm really happy we opened the Sporadic Energy miniseries with someone who pushes the model outside my more spirit-centric comfort zone, because, in a classically chaos magic sense, Phil's life is all the evidence you need to demonstrate you really can get that dog to hunt if you wish. Do check out Phil's interviews listed in the show notes. Obviously, I'm biased, but my recommendations are Dr. Elaine Ingham and Jeff Lawton. They're all good, though. Lots of worthwhile voices to listen to. Speaking of worthwhile voices, let's see if I can land this segue without sounding self-aggrandizing. Be sure to subscribe to the show to listen to all my worthwhile weekly guests. Nailed it. Do so either in your favorite podcatcher or on YouTube. And if you're listening in Australia and want more of a live-action version, I have an event coming up on August 19th in the Blue Mountains. Watch Rune Soup over the weekend for more information. Other than that, com wtude, find me on Twitter, where I am Gordon, Gordon, _White, WHITE. Until next time.